Okay, so tonight we're going to talk about training parents of children with behavioral disorders. What we will discuss, what is parent training, why is parent training important, why I chose this as my topic, a summary of the studies that I reviewed, and what is important about my review, application of parent training, and moving forward. So, what is parent training? Parent training is pretty much a behavior skills program that was created to help parents um, change the way that they handle problem behaviors. That way, we are not incidentally reinforcing the undesired behaviors. We always want to increase those desired behaviors. We want them to have skills that they can use for increasing those desired behaviors. Why is parent training important? Like I stated, there's a risk of incidental reinforcement. We do not want the parents reinforcing the problem behavior. That is one of the biggest hindrances of ABA, I feel like. We work so hard to not reinforce the problem behavior, and without parent training, the parents they just keep reinforcing it, and they keep doing what they've always done, and that hasn't worked. So we need to show them what they can do to stop reinforcing that problem behavior. We also need to show them that they have control over these behaviors. They have control over the attention function, the tangible function, the escape function. Automatic function's a little bit different, but we can also exert control there too. So all of these functions the parents can have control over. It doesn't always have to be the child having control. Lastly, it's important to give the parents tools in their toolbox that they can use when they're out in the community, when they're at home, when they're at school, when they're just out doing things, so that we can decrease that incidental reinforcement. What I wanted to know from this research project were characteristics of parents that miss parent training or that drop out. How can attendance be improved? Because I feel like that is an important factor of parent training. You have to be there to get the tools. Is it more effective with children on or off medication? Is there a setting like the home or a clinic that is more effective? So my first article, their participants, they had 40 single mothers or single mother families participate in the study. They reached out to these families by radio, phone, newspaper. I think they even said they used mail to contact some of them. So they sent out all these flyers and ads, and when parents would call in, they would just write down their name. They even had a wait list, so that if somebody dropped out, they could just pick right back up. The treatments that they used were just the traditional parent training. They had 3 groups that they assessed. They had one that was called the completed group, the dropout group. These are the ones that started but did not finish the parent training. And then they have the never attended group. These are the parents that signed up and they never attended the parent training. So the findings in this study, we're going to talk about the parental cognition first. Parental cognition was found to be lower in the group that never attended than in the group that dropped out and in the group that completed the parent training. Some barriers to treatment, they found that the groups that had dropouts and the groups that never attended, they had quite a few more barriers to treatment than the group that completed the training. depressive symptoms, this they found there was no significant difference of depressive symptoms, stressors, or um, demands between all three of these groups. And then we will talk about the critique of the articles at the end. I want to do them all together. My next article was by the same author. It was just 5 years earlier. They also used 40 single mother families, and they also reached out the same way. They had a wait list for this one too. Very similar in the participant area on that one. The treatment, they use what was called the STEP program, and then they use something called or not something called, but the traditional parent training program. The only difference between the STEP program and the traditional parent training program was that the STEP program had enhanced content, so it was better content. They had better videos. They had a better delivery. And also with the STEP program, they had an intake process to see what barriers in the parent training might be. So the findings with this, they found that attendance and homework was increased with parents in the STEP program, so they turned their homework in on time. They came to the program, or they came to the training. It was increased. It was not very high for the behavioral parent training. The dropout rate, there was a big difference in the dropout rate. So for the STEP program, it was only 10%. And then for the traditional parent training, it was 65%. There was, again, no significant difference between the therapy process and the treatment equivalence measures. There is a graph right here that shows you the retention in the behavior parent treatment group. So at the top, it has the STEP program, and then it shows the traditional parent program. There is a tremendous difference in the retention rates of those. I thought that was interesting to look at. The next article that I reviewed had 124 children from ages 4 to 14 years old. All of them had disruptive behavior, and then some of them had autism, some had Asperger's, and some had PDD-NOS. This was the study where they used medicine with behavioral parent training, and then they used medicine alone. And the medicine that they used is called risperidone. So what they found in this was that there was no real difference between the risperidone alone and the risperidone and the parent training with the children that did not have a comorbidity of anxiety. So, the children with anxiety, they responded better to the behavior treatment alone. I'm sorry, I have that backwards. Children with ADHD and anxiety responded better to the behavior treatment than children without comorbid anxiety. The children with parents with symptoms of depression, they also had less improvement in this study. The next study, they had 130 parents and their children, 3 to 4 years of age in this study. They all had ADHD, and then 44.6% of the children also had ODD. In this article, they used 2 different treatments. One was the New Forest Parenting Program. This one was conducted in the home. They used the home and family environment to teach the parents how to handle self-regulation in children with ADHD. So the therapist would teach the parents to teach the child how to handle the self-regulation. And then in the helping the non-compliant child, this was conducted in a clinic. They worked more on parent-child relationship, and they use discipline skills to reduce defiant behavior. The results of this one, the HNC was more effective than the NFPP, but only with the comorbidity of ODD. If the child did not have ODD, then the NFPP was more effective. Alright, last article. This one had 270 families as participants. The children were ages from 3 to 10 years old. They all had externalizing problem behaviors like ADD, ADHD, and disruptive behaviors, ODD. The treatment that they used here was just the original parent management training. They used assessments 3 months before, immediately before, right after, and then 12 months after the treatment is how they collected their data. So the group with more problem behaviors showed that the parent training was more effective in that group. The group with more disruptive behavior showed a decrease in disruptive behavior. And then for both of the groups, the kids who had shown to be more impaired had actually shown more improvement from the parent training. So, a critique of the studies, they were all pretty much the same. There were 2 that I had questions about, and that was the first 2. They'd used the same participants in their studies, so it wasn't made clear if they were completely different people. Even though the studies were 5 years apart, I feel like there could have been some overlapping with the participants in that. They didn't make it clear if they wrote down names and ruled them out. So that was the only problem I had with those 2. They all described, except the first 2, the rest of them described the participants and the settings pretty much to a T. I feel like I could go back and just replicate it. They all described the dependent variable in detail, and they all exhibited social validity. They were just all very well written articles and very detailed. So the importance of my review, parent training should not only be used with children with ASD. I feel like in the world of ABA, when people say parent training, they think of kids with autism. And that's not true. Parent training has proven to be effective for kids with ADHD, ADD, with other behavioral problems, disorders. One thing that I do feel like is important to take away from these articles is that assessing barriers prior to treatment will help you and the parents be more effective in completing the parent training. If we know what their barriers are prior to treatment, then we can help them either get over those hurdles or help them work through them, or we can say, hey, this is how we need to do it, and any way that I can help you, I will. So I feel like that will just bring more collaboration to the table on that. Application. Parent training can be used in the home, in the clinic, in the community, at school. It could also be beneficial for teachers and staff if they had a training somewhat like parent training. That would be neat to implement. Moving forward, I would like to see more studies on a lower SES versus a higher SES with parent training. I'd like to see more studies about father involvement in parent training. Um, I would like to see a specific training for teachers and staff at school, because right now I don't believe that we have one in place for that. And kiddos spend a lot of time at school, so I feel like the teachers and staff also need to be following behavior plans that are set in place. And if they don't know what to do, then they can't implement them correctly. Another question that I had was, is parent training more effective in a group, or is it more effective individually? And honestly, my answer was, it probably just depends on the parent and the type of person they are. Um, some learn better individually, and some they love having a group to discuss things with. So I think it would be interesting to see a study on that as well. There are my references, and thank you.